Hello everyone, International Rations here again, and today I have another 24-hour European ration. This one is a 24-hour ration manufactured for the armed forces of Ukraine, and as you can see, it's quite big. I had to go ahead and fold in this carry handle flap just to fit it in the frame. I haven't translated the packing list, I want to be surprised just like you are, but it does look quite long, so there should be a lot of stuff in here. This is the expiration date. It says 01/08/2025. I believe Ukraine uses a day, month, year, so this should still be good for a few months. If they use month, day, year, then that means it expired on February, so it's a couple months expired. Either way, it should be fine. Usually rations are good 2 or 3 years out of their expiration date and you don't notice anything. But without any further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and get right into this. So it looks like these are organized into lunch, breakfast, and supper. This one's pretty light, might be breakfast. Alright, so this one's definitely the smallest, this one is the second smallest, this one is the largest. And that's all. It's breakfast, lunch, dinner. There's not a snack accessory pack or anything like that. It's just organized into these 3 little bags. So I'm going to go ahead and find out which one is breakfast, and then we'll go ahead and open them as the meals come along. Alright, first meal of the day. This one is breakfast. Looks like they eat pretty light. Let's go ahead and see what we have in here. Alright, not the way it's supposed to be open, but I suppose that works. So we have a main course in a retort pouch. I'll go ahead and translate that later. We have the seal of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, I believe that is. Either that or it's the seal of Ukraine itself, not 100% sure. We have a little packet of Gran Dorado Espresso. I don't believe I've ever had espresso in a ration before. This must be some kind of a wet wipe. A napkin. Not a great deal of napkin here, but it's better than nothing. A packet. I believe this is sugar, but I'll go ahead and translate it. None of those words there are what I recognize as sugar in Russian or Kazakh, but it might be different in Ukrainian. We have some kind of hard-baked bread. We have a spoon. A little flimsy, but I guess I've seen worse. We have another packet of what I believe is sugar. Looks like this is either salt or pepper. Probably pepper. And that's everything for breakfast. I'm going to go ahead and get this translated and onto a plate, and I'll see you there. Alright, welcome back. I went ahead and got everything translated. So this is some kind of a pea stew with vegetables and pork. And I previously said that breakfast looks pretty light, but I officially changed my mind. Between this and also the biscuits, there should be plenty of food here that'll last quite a while. It would be one thing if this was a muesli, but a stew like this will keep you fed for a long time. Next up we have these plain galettes, and this word translates something like Cossack. I believe that's the brand. Cossacks are pretty important in Ukrainian history, so it makes sense that they're branded with the Cossack name brand. Next up, these are indeed sugar packets, but as I thought, this doesn't say sugar, rather it's inspirational messages. And the translator was very fickle with these, but they say something to the effect of, "Nothing is impossible." And then the other one says something to the effect of, "Believe in yourself, go ahead, faith wins." So little inspirational messages on the front of the sugar packets, and then on the back is where it actually says it's plain crystallized white sugar. And then we have our espresso. The instructions do come in English on the back here. However, all it says is to dissolve in hot water. It does not specify how much, which is a little confusing for me because I understand espressos are usually smaller than regular coffees, so I don't know how much I'm supposed to put in here. But let's go ahead and try it and see if we can find a good mix. And I really don't know if this is supposed to be small like an espresso shot or big like just a regular drip coffee. I'm going to go ahead and try it like this. I'll probably end up adding more water though. And yeah, that's pretty strong like that. I think I'll just go ahead and add the rest of the water. Hopefully this doesn't dilute it too much. Alright, it's got a pretty nice coffee hue. I'm going to go ahead and try this and see how it is. It's pretty run-of-the-mill as far as instant coffee goes. I do think I went ahead and added too much water and now it's a bit too diluted. But since it's an espresso, you still can get a pretty deep coffee flavor. But it is watered down just a little bit too much. Alright, let's go ahead and open these galettes here. Galettes is what this translated to, but if I'm not mistaken, galettes is just the Spanish word for biscuits. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. The translator is really fickle sometimes, so who really knows what it directly translates to. However, it's definitely some kind of hard-baked bread. So let's go ahead and get right into this. Alright. Just very large kind of biscuit or cracker wafers here. I did order this ration, of course, all the way from Ukraine, so I must say these held up very well. I'm going to go ahead and break a piece off. Let's go ahead and see if they're any good. Alright, so to be honest, I really didn't like that bite. I'm going to go ahead and get another bite, a bit bigger here, and just make sure I can really nail down this flavor. But it isn't very good. It's a very whole grain, very whole wheat construction, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. There's really no salt, and it just tastes a little bit off. I don't think it's stale or rancid, but it sort of has that flavor to it. I'm gonna go ahead and try it again. So it's hard to explain. It has a kind of sharp taste that really hits you after you've been chewing it for a couple seconds. I'm not sure if that's part of the wheat or if it's maybe something they put in to fortify it, like I'm not exactly sure. I think they put niacin and stuff like that into bread. I'm not sure if it's sort of like a mineral or chemical kind of taste or if it's just part of the wheat. But there's that, and then the actual grain taste of it, of the biscuit itself, is also just not very good in my opinion. It's a very, very strong sort of, I suppose you could say, earthy. It almost tastes like raw wheat in a sense, which I can't recall actually eating raw wheat. It kind of tastes like how you would think raw wheat tastes like. But they're definitely cooked through. I don't think I'm going to get anything from eating them. They're just biscuits. They're food, so there is that. They're tolerable, absolutely. And I will be going ahead and finishing them up. But they're not good. I don't enjoy eating them. There are a lot better biscuits that I've had in the past. I don't know if these are the worst. I can't really recall. But these are definitely down there. They're just really not enjoyable at all. So I think I'm going to go ahead and prepare this, and then maybe I'll break these up and eat those with the stew. I think that's pretty common to do. So let's go ahead and open this up. This hasn't been heated yet, so I'll go ahead and open it up, look at it, and then I'll heat it up. I believe they moved towards retorts just in the past couple of years, and they definitely look pretty modern, just like any other retorts you'd see. In the past, I do believe they used cans. Alright, so here we go. It looks like it's some kind of a mush. The peas are not like a bright green that you might get off the shelf in the freezer section here in the States. They're a much more dull kind of brown. They look almost a little bit like rice. I'm going to go ahead and get this heated up and we can get a much better look at it. Alright, so here we are. I've got that meal prepared. It doesn't really look that appetizing, but I suppose on the bright side, there's probably not any food. But on the bright side, I suppose there's probably not any food dyes or anything in here. I had a similar meal in the German ration that was really good, so hopes are pretty high. Alright, without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and say a quick prayer and get into this main course. Alright, so here we go. This is a pea stew with vegetables and pork. It looks like the majority of those vegetables they mentioned is carrot. Let's go ahead and try to get a little bit of everything. It looks like there's some pork in there, so I'm going to go ahead and see if this is any good. First impressions are really good. You can definitely tell they put a lot of spices and seasoning in here. Probably the most notable of which is salt, which will help preserve it. Especially common in pork. You hear a lot about salted pork. And I would guess that's what this is. Probably that's where a lot of that salt flavor is coming from. But I think there are a lot of other spices in here as well. Maybe some kind of onion powder or something like that. But whatever it is in here, it's really good. I'm going to go ahead and take another bite. And the high sodium content combined with the biscuits probably means you'll want to have a lot of water on hand for this. But it is really good. The seasoning is great. I really like the salt flavor it has. The pork, peas, and vegetables are all cooked perfectly fine. They don't seem like they're super bottom shelf low quality ingredients. They all seem like they're quite good. And honestly, there's just nothing bad that can be said about this. I'm going to go ahead and try it with some of these biscuits, because if there's any way you can improve these biscuits, and like I said, they're not really that bad, but if there's any way you can improve them, it's probably with this meal. And yeah, I would have to say that probably tastes even better. The flavor of the dish completely overrides any of the weird flavor I've been getting from the biscuits, and the crunch is a really nice added texture. So what you end up with is a really good flavor and a better texture than with just the stew itself. And it's definitely not what you would consider a traditional breakfast here in the States. Even MREs and European rations usually don't have a crazy hearty breakfast. Usually there's plenty enough to keep you going, but it's not super high in protein. It's usually carb based. Whereas this will definitely give you plenty of protein, and I would wager it gives you quite a bit of carbs as well. But either way, this is a really good meal. I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. So that's the main course done, and the last bite was just about as good as the first. Like I mentioned, I had a meal similar in the German ration that I thought was really good, so I had high expectations. But honestly, I think those expectations have been exceeded. It might be even better than the meal I had in the German ration, and the German ration is probably my favorite of all time. So that's a pretty high bar. The biscuits drag the average of the meal down just a little bit, but like I said, once you get used to them, they're not that bad. And I was hungry for breakfast since I had a light supper yesterday. However, I'm not hungry at all, and I'm wondering how I'm going to be able to eat lunch. This meal was absolutely massive for breakfast. I was wondering what went into it since it was a really good ration, so I went ahead and translated the label. And I must say I'm pretty impressed with the ingredients. So the ingredients are as follows: peas, drinking water, pork, onion, carrot, refined sunflower oil, table salt, and spices. So there's no artificial preservatives or real artificial ingredients or anything like that. I think it's the closest to a home-cooked meal you could possibly find in a ration. I know retort pouches are pretty good technology, but I'm honestly surprised that it can seal in a meal with so little preservatives for 2 years. Probably the main reason for that is the high salt content, which is really good at preserving food. I have no problems with MREs and I quite enjoy them, but I have to say, as far as being natural and healthy, this definitely blows them out of the water. Alright, let's go ahead and open up our lunch. It's by far the largest meal of the day, and I think that's pretty common in Eastern Europe and quite a few other places as well. First up, we have this very large 500 gram retort pouch. Next, we have another retort pouch. This one is 350 grams. Next, we have some jam, which I'm really happy to see. In my experience, Eastern Europe makes really good jam and really good honey as well. We have another wet wipe, some golden Ceylon black fine tea, another packet of those Cossack biscuits, a packet of some kind of cookies or something like that, we have 2 more packets of the sugar with inspirational messages, as well as some salt and pepper. And then we also have another napkin and another spoon. So I'm going to go ahead and get this translated and plated, and I will see you there. Alright, so here is lunch translated and plated. This is going to be very difficult to eat it all in one sitting. I may go ahead and save some of this for later. But as for what all this is, these are army rye crackers. This is cherry jam with no dye and no artificial flavoring, and it is vitamin fortified. At least I believe that's what that translates to. This is beans, vegetables, and pork, and this is rice soup with meat broth and chicken. So this is a lot of very hearty food, and I may not be able to finish it, but I'll definitely try everything and maybe just save a little for later. But first up, I figured let's try these rye biscuits. We haven't seen these yet. Oh, those are croutons. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say these are for our soup. So rather than pouring all these out just yet, I'm going to go ahead and set this aside for when we heat up our soup. And I'm going to go ahead and try one of these. And it tastes like a pretty regular crouton. There's no sort of seasoning or even salt on them as far as I can tell. The rye grain separates it a little bit from a crouton that would be made out of wheat. And if I'm not mistaken, these are rye as well. So I think that's the kind of odd flavor I'm picking up on the bread items. It's not too bad once you get used to it. And the croutons are actually pretty good. It's just a little bit different and something that most people here in the US probably wouldn't be used to. But let's go ahead and try some of this cherry jam. Gonna try to knead it a little bit and make sure it's still all together and hasn't separated. Alright, here we go. Like I said, I usually like Eastern European jam. They usually make it really good, so expectations are quite high. Alright, there we go. I'll try a little on the spoon first, and then I'll put it on a biscuit. That's really good. It's bursting with flavor. I'm not sure if there's added sugar or not, but it's very sweet. It has a very coarse texture. You can definitely tell that it's made out of real cherries that have been ground up. And if you've ever had apple butter before, I would say it's kind of similar to that. It's a very coarse texture. It's very sweet. But of course, this is a bit closer to jam, and it uses cherries instead of apples. But I would say that's probably the closest thing I can compare it to. I'm going to go ahead and see if it'll improve these biscuits. Here we go. I didn't really pick up much jam flavor there, so I'm going to put a lot more on there and see how this tastes. It's definitely an improvement by quite a bit, but the grain flavor of this is really strong, and the jam, you have to put a lot on there and it really fights to actually show up when you're eating it. It's really being overpowered by the biscuit unless you put quite a lot of jam on it. Alright, that tea is steeping. Let's go ahead and open this up and get this heated up. It bears a bit of a resemblance to chicken noodle soup. Smells very strongly of chicken stock, which is the base in here, I believe. Let's go ahead and get this heated up. I have to say, it does look pretty good. I went ahead and microwaved the soup as instructed, and I put it in this kind of a soup bowl. I have to say, it looks large enough to be a meal of its own. But without any further ado, I'm going to say a quick prayer and get right into this. Alright, first up is going to be a bite without any croutons. It looks like we have everything. We've got some rice, vegetables, and pork. Or actually, I believe this one was chicken. It's pretty good. It's nothing revolutionary, but it's definitely leaps and bounds ahead of dehydrated soup. There's definitely plenty of salt and some spices and seasoning in here, but I don't think the flavor is quite as vibrant or powerful as our breakfast main course. Nonetheless, it's still a really good soup, and it's something I would expect to be served at a restaurant, which I certainly can't say the same of any of the dehydrated soups that I've had. They're always quite noticeably worse than a regular soup. This is actually the first non-dehydrated soup that I've ever had in a ration, so it's pretty cool that they include that. It's definitely upping the weight of the ration quite a bit because you have the chicken stock, and it's quite a heavy meal. It was 500 grams, so half a kilogram, and that really adds up, but it's probably worth it for such a good meal, not to mention such a large meal. You definitely could drop either of these courses here and still have a perfectly adequate lunch. But let's go ahead and try this with one of the croutons. I'll just drop it in there and let it have a little bit of a soak. Alright, let's try this with a crouton. And yeah, it's nothing too crazy, but the crouton does add a nice little bit of crunch and flavor. I do think they improved them enough to go ahead and just put them all in there. This isn't a real huge complaint, although I would say they're a bit too large. You can barely get both one of these and the soup in your mouth at once, but that's a pretty minor complaint, all things considered. They taste pretty fresh, they don't taste too stale. There's nothing really too special about them. Overall, it's a pretty regular meal. Like I said, I'd completely expect this kind of soup to be served at a restaurant. It's maybe not quite Michelin star, however, for a mid-range kind of run-of-the-mill restaurant, this is definitely something I would be expecting, and I'd have no complaints at all. Before I go ahead and finish up that soup, let's go ahead and try this black Ceylon tea. Again, fairly run-of-the-mill. There's not anything too different you can do with black Ceylon tea. When it's the same kind of tea in the same region as pretty much all the other tea that's included in a ration, then there's really not going to be too much variation, and that's not a bad thing. But yeah, pretty run-of-the-mill. It's not a super strong flavor, which you could of course up the strength by adding less water. But yeah, it's a nice hot beverage to have with your meal. There's really no complaints from me. I do think I might as well go ahead and try it with a little bit of this sugar though, since I don't really see another application for it, and I do want to try the sugar. Just do my due diligence and try everything. First I'm going to put just a little bit here on my palm and try it plain. And it's pretty much just regular sugar as one would expect. Fairly large crystals, I would say. Let's go ahead and try this. The sugar isn't a bad addition. I'd probably prefer it black, but I don't have a super huge preference either way. I'd say it's probably a 7 out of 10 tea, just a regular, dependable black Ceylon tea. I'm going to go ahead and finish up the soup, and then we can get on to the second main course here. I will say this is probably the closest thing to an American-style meal I've seen. It doesn't look quite identical, but it's pretty similar to pork and beans, at least by looking at it. I'm going to go ahead and try a bite and see if it tastes similar. It's very good. It's not too similar to pork and beans, and I believe the reason for that is this broth here. It's some kind of I believe it's a meat-based broth. It's very salty, and if I had to guess, it's probably chicken like the soup, but I don't know for sure. It may be pork, since this is a pork and bean stew, or it may be something similar. But most brands of baked beans, especially like the cans that you buy that are pre-made, you just heat on your stove, they have kind of like a thicker, more syrup kind of base, and they're usually some kind of like a sweet, sort of like maple based, and they're usually quite a bit different. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's almost like a syrupy, sometimes it's maple flavoring, it really depends, but it doesn't seem to be meat based, whereas this is more of a stew with a meat broth with some pork and beans. It's really good. It reminds me quite a lot of the meal I had for breakfast, and I think the basic recipe is the same. They pretty much just swapped out the peas for the beans. Just like the breakfast, it has a lot of spices and seasonings, and it's very salty. I would actually say it might even be just a little bit too salty, but at the very least, it does give it a bit more of a complex and more interesting flavor than just not having any salt. And I would have to assume the reason they use salt is that they don't want to use artificial preservatives, and by adding a lot of salt, it will make the meal shelf stable for a long time, and you don't have to use artificial preservatives. But let's try this with some of the biscuits. It's quite good. I'm pretty sure these biscuits are made to go along with the main course. They soak in that broth, and they actually cut down a bit on the saltiness. And because these biscuits don't really have any salt in them as far as I can tell, they don't add to the saltiness, they just cut it down. They also add a nice little crunchy texture. And the flavor that the broth infuses is a lot better than the stronger, kind of odd rye flavor that they typically have. So I think it's a really good combination. I'm going to go ahead and finish it up. But before I finish this up and potentially store any leftovers, I'll just go ahead and throw out some closing thoughts for the lunch. First off, it was obviously very big. I'm going to have absolutely no problem with being hungry until supper. And while it's not exactly Michelin star or anything, it's a relatively fancy meal for a ration, honestly. You get a tea, you get a actual soup that was never dehydrated, and they even give you croutons, which is a really nice touch, and I can't recall having croutons in a ration before. Maybe I have and it's just slipping my mind, but either way, that's a really nice touch. I also think that they have built it very precisely and with a very singular goal in mind. They don't care about frivolities. They didn't include any isotonic beverages. They haven't yet included dessert, although there's probably going to be a chocolate bar for supper. But overall, no frivolities. They've made a both complete meal, but without anything extra. There's no sugary snacks. There's no fruit bar with a bunch of high fructose corn syrup. There's no puddings, there's no cakes. There's just a lot of very hearty and very sustaining food. And I think that's definitely what they're concerned about and what they're focused on. They don't care about having a super sugary ration. They don't even care that much about having a bunch of quality of life accessories. For example, I do think an isotonic beverage would not be amiss. So it's a bit disappointing to not see one yet, but they do include teas and coffees, and they definitely make up for it as far as just giving you a lot of quality food. It's just simple, real food. I've been checking the ingredients list from time to time, not on everything, but the main courses, and the ingredients are usually just water, some kind of carbohydrate like rice or something similar, maybe some beans or peas in the case of breakfast. Then there's some meat, there's some vegetables, spices, maybe there's like chicken stock for the soup, and there's a lot of salt, but that's pretty much it. There's not a long list of ingredients, there's not stuff you can't pronounce. I'm honestly really impressed. I believe these rations last around 2 years, but so far there's been absolutely nothing that was bad, rancid, or broken. So it's impressive that they can actually make simple meals that contain, as far as I can tell, very real ingredients with no artificial preservatives that last 2 years at a minimum. I mean, I'd be willing to go out on a limb and say you could eat these quite a bit longer after their expiration date. But yeah, so overall the impressions are really good. I'm impressed at the food. It's tasty, it's high quality, it's surprisingly natural, there's no artificial preservatives. They give you more than enough. So overall impressions are really good. I'm excited for supper, and I will see you there. Alright, so here we are. I've got supper right here. I can't say I'm exactly famished after the lunch I had, but it is supper time, so I better go ahead and get right into this. Okay, first up we have another retort pouch. Gonna go ahead and translate that later. We have another package of what could be those croutons, but I'll have to translate that to double check. Some more Cossack rusks, or biscuits rather. Another Golden Ceylon black fine tea. Some more sugar. Another wet napkin. Looks like we have some honey here. That should be pretty good. Some more sugar. A napkin. A spoon. A packet of salt. And that's everything. I'm going to go ahead and get this translated and plated, and I will see you right there. Alright, so I went ahead and got everything plated and translated. This is indeed another packet of the croutons. I'm not sure if you're supposed to mix that in with the main meal or just kind of eat them on their own as a side. It makes a lot of sense to include them with a soup, but I'm actually not really sure why they're here, especially when we have these biscuits. But either way, I'm sure we can find a use for them. I might even save them for later, since I've already tried them before. This translates, of course, to honey, and this is in particular floral honey. I've not actually heard of that before. And then this is a barley porridge with chicken. So first up, let's go ahead and try this honey. It may have separated a little bit. That's a much lighter tint than I've ever seen in a honey. But let's go ahead and try this. And that's pretty good. It tastes like honey. It's quite a bit floral, like its name would suggest. And it also has a pretty grainy texture, which I'm not sure if that means it was indeed separated, or maybe that just means it's a little bit more natural. Either way, I don't really think it's separated because I have been kneading this a little bit before I opened it, so I think that's probably just the way it is. Definitely interesting. I've never seen honey with such a light hue before, but either way, it's pretty cool. I may as well go ahead and try that on one of these rusks. Technically, I guess they're not rusks. They translate to galettes, I believe it is, or galettas, something like that. I've been calling them rusks because that's what came in with the Polish ration, and they kind of remind me of them for some reason. But anyway, let's go ahead and try this. And of course, the more you put on there, the deeper honey color it gets, but it's still considerably lighter than most honeys. And same issue as with the jam, it just really gets overpowered by that biscuit flavor. I'm going to go ahead and stir this up, try this. It might need to steep a little bit longer. I'd say that's about ready. I'm going to go ahead and stir in quite a lot of honey with this tea. Let's go ahead and try this. Black Ceylon Gold tea with Ukrainian honey. The honey doesn't come through quite as strong as I thought it would. It might be that it's just a perhaps lighter version of honey, if that makes any sense. Not quite as strong. Tasting it on the spoon, it tasted like a pretty regular honey. Same sweetness and everything like that, just more of a hint of a floral tone. I think I'm just going to go ahead and put the rest of the honey in with the tea. Try to get a little bit stronger of a flavor. I really don't see another use for this honey, since I really just don't think it's that good on the biscuits. That comes through much stronger, and it actually has a very pleasant flavor. It gives the tea a very floral kind of taste. It's funny, although it does definitely sweeten the tea quite a bit, it's not quite as much as you would think. The flavor that's coming through is less honey and a lot more of a floral flavor, with the sweetness kind of trailing behind that. It's a really interesting combination, and I think it really elevates the tea. I really like it this way. I think it's much preferable to just a regular tea, and the floral flavoring really adds a lot of complexity. But without any further ado, we might as well go ahead and open up this main course. This is the porridge with chicken. Alright, there we go. Quite a lot of carrots in there. I would have to assume they grow quite a lot of carrots in Ukraine because there have been a lot of carrots in, I believe, all of the main courses. So I'm going to go ahead and get this heated up and then we can try it. Okay, here we go. This is our porridge. I think it's buckwheat or something to that effect. I'm not 100% sure. It's actually the first main course we've had, now that I think about it, that's more of a singular solid meal rather than like a stew or a soup, which is what we've had. I certainly don't mind them. They were both really good, and so is the soup. However, it is definitely nice to have some variety. But without any further ado, I'm going to say a quick prayer and get right into this. Okay, here we go. I'm not really picking up on any seasoning or spices. There's not even much salt as far as I can tell in here. I'm going to go ahead and try another bite. So in that second bite, I did pick up some salt flavoring, but still no seasoning or spices or really anything like that. It's just the grain, the vegetables, and the chicken. All the other meals have been pretty simple, but they've still had a lot of flavoring, a lot of seasoning and spices and salt, whereas this really doesn't have any of that. And for that reason, I am going to actually go ahead and use the salt and pepper. This pepper was left over from lunch, and like I mentioned, the lunch main course was very well seasoned, so I didn't use this. But it's lucky I saved it for supper, because this really could use some kind of spice and more complexity than it has. Okay, let's go ahead and see if that's made any difference. That didn't really help that much, so I went ahead and added the rest of the salt packet, and hopefully this will pick up the flavor quite a bit. And unfortunately, that just didn't really help that much. After how good the earlier meals were, it is a bit of a letdown. It's still definitely not the worst thing in the world, but it is unfortunate that all the other ones were seasoned so well, and this one is just, quite frankly, bland. But maybe trying it with these biscuits will help just a little bit. I went ahead and tried it with those biscuits. It is probably a little bit better with the biscuits than without, but it doesn't make much of a difference. And either way, it's definitely, well, not being bad, and I'll have no problems finishing it. It's still definitely the worst meal of the ration. Not because it's necessarily the worst meal ever, but the other ones were the other ones before it were so good, it raises the bar significantly, and this really just doesn't cut it. But it's also far from unbearable. It's just bland. I've had plenty of bland meals and rations before, so it's nothing to be too upset about, but still, compared to the other meals, it is quite a bit of a letdown. Alright, so I went ahead and finished up that main course, and that does it for this ration. And I have to say, I'm pretty impressed. Breakfast and lunch were really good. There is far more than enough food. In fact, for lunch, there was probably close to 1 kilogram of food there, between 500 grams for the soup, 350 for the main course, and then the biscuits and croutons. I have to tell you, I was barely able to finish it. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and save the second pack of croutons and the rest of these crackers or biscuits, rusks or galettes, whatever these are more properly called. Perhaps I'll be hungry a little bit later in the evening, but these will probably be saved at least until tomorrow. The coffees and the teas were all pretty good. There's nothing too terribly special there, but there's not really anything too special you can do with coffee and tea. They were good quality, and they were perfectly fine, and in my book, that's pretty good. Probably the main thing that I would change if I were put in charge of this would be these biscuits. They're just not that good in my opinion. They have a very strong wheat flavor that overpowers whenever you put on jam or honey, which kind of makes it a waste of your jam because you put a whole bunch on the biscuit, but the grain flavor is so strong you don't really taste it, and you kind of end up just wasting it. So I would go for a more typical biscuit, but overall, it's a pretty small nitpick. And the only other thing that I could add would be maybe some isotonic beverages. However, with how healthy the ration was comparatively, they might not be looking to add really sugary sports-type drinks like isotonic beverages into the ration. It seems like they're going for a much more natural, much healthier kind of assortment of foods and drink. It's entirely possible the reason they didn't add isotonic beverages is because they don't want to be introducing a lot of empty calories and sugar into the ration. Even so, I'm pretty sure you could find some kind of healthy drink to add if the reason they haven't been adding isotonic beverages is because they want only healthy items in the ration. I don't know. It's just a guess based on how natural and kind of Whole Foods-esque this has been. Aside from those two things, the only other thing would be that this supper meal was pretty bland, and I would go ahead and add some spices or something to that. Like I said, it's far from the end of the world. I was able to eat it just fine, and overall it was still okay. If you could get it closer to the flavor of those breakfast and lunch meals, then this ration would be probably a 9 out of 10 at least. So overall, I would say this is an 8.5 out of 10 ration. Just go ahead and dock half of a point for the biscuits, the isotonic beverages, rather lack thereof, and the supper main course, which was too bland. Then you come out with 8.5. Everything else in the ration was more or less perfect. The jam, honey, the other main courses, they were all 10 out of 10s. And there's really no complaints to be had about the coffee or tea either. And you certainly can't complain about the amount of food, and there's probably even more food by quite a margin than in the Kazakh ration. I'd say this would be coming close to the Dutch ration in just how much food it had, and if you recall, I couldn't finish the Dutch ration. If you haven't seen that video, I'll probably go ahead and link it at the end here, because it was a pretty interesting video and a really huge ration. But that does it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed filming it. It was a great ration. If you liked the video, feel free to give it a like, as well as a comment with what you thought of the video, an idea for a future ration to try, anything that's on your mind. Let me know if you think there's something I didn't mention that they could do to improve the ration, or something that I thought was good maybe that you thought wasn't so good. Anything like that. I always appreciate the responses and the feedback I get in the comments. Likewise, if you didn't like the video, feel free to give it a dislike, and feel free to give it a comment with some constructive criticism on how I could improve. If you're interested in seeing my future videos, go ahead and subscribe and click the bell notification button, and that'll alert you whenever I have a new video that's released. I usually alternate between doing European rations and US MREs, so the next video should be a US MRE. I haven't picked the one yet, but it'll probably be a vegetarian menu since I have quite a few of those on hand. So if that sounds like it's interesting to you, make sure you subscribe, and I hope to see you there.